Hey, Lauren. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Amazing. We're so happy to have you. Can you just kind of, I guess, introduce yourself, tell us what you're doing at Scribe, and just anything else you want to tell the world at large?
Oh, I would love to. So, I'm Lauren Funaro. I'm head of content at Scribe. I've been here for 2 years. And if you haven't heard about Scribe, I'm going to go ahead and give a shameless plug. It is the coolest software out there right now. It is a process documentation tool that essentially follows your screen, but instead of creating a video, it creates a visual step by step guide with text and annotated screenshots. It has a extension and a desktop app, and it's absolutely the coolest. Like, I actually used it before I worked here, so I can attest to it in a non-biased way. But as head of content, I manage our SEO distribution specifically, including editorial and also different landing pages. And it's been an incredibly fun ride. I'm so proud of what we've done. When I started at Scribe, we were very much a startup. We were a Series A in our early stages. And now I'm proud to say that we have raised our Series B, and it's only up from here as far as I'm concerned.
That's amazing. And I love that idea of written documentation processing because I'm a person who thrives in an async environment. And
Mhm.
so having like docs that you can annotate is phenomenal. Like I can absolutely see how you might be drinking your own champagne, so to speak. Um, so fantastic. How did you get it started into content? I feel like we all just sort of, I don't know, fall into it. There's certainly not a degree for it. So how did you get started?
That's such a great point and absolutely true in my experience. So, I graduated school as an English major and I knew only one thing, which was that I wanted to write. I ended up starting in marketing in a very generalist role. And that was really because I was interested in content and copy. So, that started my trajectory in marketing. I started evolving into a comms career in a much more corporate environment. And following that, I started working at Scribe under the brilliant Jacob Rudnick, who was head of content prior to my foray into it, as a content editor. And really, that meant digging deeply into the content we were creating, working with freelance writers to evolve that content, identifying our brand voice, and in that process, I learned that I also have a deep love for what I call the gamification of content, meaning I get the chance to play around with what's evolving in Google, what's learning what's happening in the SERP, and then creating content that matches that need, and then optimizing consistently and really building up what is now an awesome flywheel, in my opinion. And then I've gotten to marry those two loves. Now I get to write every single day, but I'm also developing a skill set that's incredibly strategic, and it's so gratifying.
That's amazing. I've never thought of it as gamification. I always just like kind of thought of it as like test, 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 iterate, that kind of thing. But you're right. It is, I mean, it's fun.
And
Like,
and you
it's
are trying
definitely
to get
fun.
to number 1, like you're racing, right?
Yeah.
And what I love, and I'll get into this later, I'm sure, about content is that it lives. It can be constantly evolving with the needs of the audience. And there's never a final piece of paper that it's done, right? I'm not
Yeah.
writing a novel that now exists out in the world. What I'm doing is creating and iterating and growing and learning. And when you look at testing from that perspective, it becomes so fun and interesting, and you get to look at other individuals in the space and learn from them. It's an incredible community of people who are willing to share. And just looking at that really makes me enjoy what I do.
Amazing. Like, that's really incredible. And I love that thought process behind like these are not pieces that we just put into the world and they just live there forever. Like no, they have to be living documents
Totally.
because as our customers change and as our companies change to like fit what our customers need, the content that also has to change. And
Exactly.
I love that. I think that's so 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 true. And I think content is such a strange world today. Like crazy stuff happened in 2022. Crazier stuff happened in 2023. Like, what do you think is the most challenging part of being a content leader today?
Oh, I love that question. I would say right now, since my primary focus is SEO distribution, the evolution of the SERP is very, I will say, fun. It is an opportunity, but it is evolving dramatically, right? And I would say, in a great way, the focus of helpful content, meaning it's now prioritizing content that is excellent versus what we've seen a lot of businesses do with keyword stuffing, creating things that are sort of templated and very repetitive. Um, so because of that, you do need to be consistently aware because also now your content is sitting lower in the SERP. So that could impact your traffic. That means that you need to evolve the type of content you're creating. We've been doing some testing around imagery because that's going to be showing up in a different way. And that means that we are consistently on our toes. Luckily, we haven't been impacted too negatively. I've heard of certain types of content, say travel blogs, I think are getting a hit. Maybe recipe blogs are getting a hit. Of course, we're not focused on that type of content. So for us, it's been about refining and evolving our content to really match that need. And some of that also is including not just copy, it's including the way that we design the page, the different things that we include in the page, images, stuff like that. It's challenging, but it's also not something we weren't prepared for. We've known this was coming for a while, so now seeing it in action gives us the chance to iterate there.
100%. And I love that, you mentioned that the level of content now has to be excellent. Like good is not good enough anymore. Mediocre does not rank. And I think that's so interesting in that, like, it's almost a little vindicating for a lot of us because I feel like there are so many content people who were just like, hey, maybe this is too fast. Maybe we should just give this like maybe one more once over, and just, hey, it'd be really cool if we could take a quarter to focus on quality. And
Yes,
and now like Google's like, hey, we hear you. Hey, it's
yes.
okay. Like we're gonna rank all of your content. And that's just it's very vindicating in a lot of ways.
You're so right. Like, and also it's thinking about the reader, right? Like it's thinking about what these people actually want to see and what answers their query, what is providing them with like the extras response. And I think there's some confusion around like what excellent content actually means. And a lot of the time it's going back to the basics, like what is the query? What does this person actually want? They aren't looking for a flowery response. They're not looking for this overproduced piece of like extra something. What they're looking for is the really the most correct and useful answer. And we're able to provide that for them.
And I think that that's really like the biggest key when it comes to Google, when it comes to just organic optimization, is that, you know, you have to think of like Google, like, okay, your target audience, like the people who are making the search queries, that is Google's customer. And
Yes.
so if you are giving Google what it needs to answer those questions and give them the information that they want and actually like give them the content that they want to consume, then Google is going to rank you because it's in
Yes.
Google's best interest to rank you. And I think that that's something that a lot of people just don't really like, they don't connect the dots on that.
You're so right. And I actually think that's humbled me a lot because I started off trying to create what I considered excellent content, right? Like something that I thought was beautiful and robust. A lot of writers fall into this. They love words, so we love to create these tangential structured sentences. And a lot of the time it's a matter of really speaking one to that person and give that's why buyer personas are so important, right? Like thinking about what's actually
Yeah.
important to them and taking yourself out of the equation has been incredibly humbling. It's a difficult experience sometimes, but so integral to making your content good.
I could not agree more. Like honestly, that is such a key thing, is like the difference between what we think is good content and like what our audience considers to be good, useful content. Like that is such a definitely, I feel like every content person goes through like a bit of a humbling moment with that. Like, oh,
Yes.
actually, this is not performing and this is my baby And then we have to like separate ourselves from the things that we create, like little tortured artists.
It's
So
so
it
true.
resonates.
I remember writing a piece of content that I was so proud of. And I remember being like, I'm going to take a counter opinion. I'm going to make, which is interesting because I think it was about like standard operating procedures. So how, I mean, how like transgressive can you get? But I was very excited about it. And it didn't perform because it didn't answer the query. It didn't focus on those basic answers that were supportive to the actual person looking for it. And that's what makes SEO distribution so exciting too, because instead of me trying to search and find people that might be relevant for it, they're the ones looking, and I'm instead meeting their need. That's the evolution of this type of content, and why I think it's so imperative. A lot of folks have said, oh, you're writing to robots, you're just trying to meet an algorithm. And I'm like, no, actually, it's probably the closest to people that you can get, because instead of me selling myself on a social platform, I'm finding that person exactly where they are.
Exactly. And that's not to say that the other kind of content, like the thing that you originally created, there's not a place for it. We just call it thought leadership. We
Exactly.
save it for LinkedIn. We save it for social media distribution. But if you're going for like organic distribution, then yeah, like answering that question is it's S tier. Absolutely. I wanted to talk about, speaking of social media, I want to talk about this post that I saw from you on LinkedIn. I already follow, we're a fan.
Oh my God, thank you.
Um, it was this post you made a couple months ago about publishing like 700 or more, 700 or more organic blogs with a team of two in a year. And I need to know more because I've done the volume thing before, but not on that level. And I just need to like, can you walk me through that process? Like, why did you do it? How did you do it?
That's a
How
great.
many freelancers did you have?
What was the reason? No, that is an excellent question. And I think I need to go back to the basics here. First, what I will say is while it was an internal team of two, we did work with incredible freelancers. So I cannot hone all of the credit for the content that was created by these brilliant writers that we leaned on, right? But to go back to the original start of when I was working with Scribe initially, we did not have any content, right? We were a very new stage company. We were at zero. We knew that content was something we wanted to pursue, but we were learning so much about the product even. So Scribe is really forging a new category in that it's very horizontal, and it's also incredibly difficult to find that key buyer persona. It's actually more about finding a type of person than it is about finding a department or an industry. So because of
Interesting.
that, we needed to learn a lot. We actually weren't sure what content types would resonate, who we should be focusing on. And in order to do that, we needed a lot of content out there to test. So this started with us finding a large group of writers and creating what we call that first 100 or so batch of content. In doing that, we applied those writers and we started building our internal operations and also creating our style guide and our very, very robust freelancer resources. So we have very large documentation that our writers can access, both about the product, about everything that we want them to include in the content. And then we started also templatizing our briefs. So these were things we knew we wanted to do so that we could operationalize our content program. In also doing that, we were able to identify writers that really just understood our audience. Like I mentioned earlier, you can be an incredible writer, you're just not necessarily writing to the channel. And so we wanted to find folks who could write to the channel, who were able to adapt, had a great memory for feedback from us. And that gave us a really strong group of writers that we could consistently apply with, right? I will say, after that first 100 batch, we were publishing at a pretty standard cadence. We were publishing about 25 blogs a month. Um, and then I remember we had our first marketing offsite. So the entire marketing team got together, including myself and Jacob, who was head of content at the time. And our CEO was in the room. And I remember her asking us, how can we 4X this? And I remember Jacob and I looking at each other. And what I love about that question is it wasn't like, can we 4X this? Should we 4X this? It was, how can we? And Scribe has always had that mentality. How can we grow? How can we move faster? And so we were like, you know what? how can we? Let's figure it out. What I'm so thankful about us having done that is that it gave us this chance to really learn who we were talking to and figure out what worked so much faster than we would have before. So, oh my gosh, here's my colleague, my cat. He's on the call with us.
What you
Um,
can't see is that mine is like right here asleep on the couch behind me. Like she is just, is
oh
she?
my gosh,
Yeah, there she is.
she's beautiful. Not to completely digress from the source of this conversation, but in that time, so learning to Forex meant we needed to really strengthen what our operations were. We needed to bulk up our briefs. I firmly believe that having strong front end support for your writers takes away a lot of that back and forth. And then
Mm,
we needed to understand what is good enough to get that content out there. So we onboarded this incredible tool called Letter Drop, which let me manage my writers, the content production, and publish all in one place. That was incredibly useful. It also includes a lot of SEO tools that help us with our editing, our optimizing, and also support our writers. So a lot of things that we might have been doing after the content was sent over to us, we were able to do much more quickly at the top of our assignment, which, oh my gosh, I cannot stress how invaluable that was for us because we needed to move quickly. So, in order to do that, we were publishing 100 or so a month, I would say, for about 4 months. It was an incredibly tedious process. It was a lot of learning, and I will not say we did it perfectly, but in that period of time, we were able to identify the content that worked really well for us and then double down on that content type. And then continue to build what we had as our supporting resourcing for those writers and just lean on the writers that we knew really clicked with us to continue to move that quickly. Now that we've done that, we're publishing at a much slower rate because we don't need to publish as quickly. And our primary motivation is optimizing that content, both for SERP, both for content growth, and also for conversion.
wow. Like I'm honestly, I'm flabbergasted. Like
Thank you. With a
because
labor of love.
that is just it's wild. How many freelancers were you working with? Like total?
I would say more than I should have been because, in my
Fair.
experience, it's actually better to have a much smaller, really powerful group of writers. I think that at the top of us, we were upward of 15, and they were incredible. But we did scale back to, I have now a strong team of about 5 that I'm really invested in.
I did the same thing at Drip. I started off with a team of like 5 or 6, and we were not doing the same volume. But what I really wanted to do was I wanted to get ahead of the game. So I
Mhm.
wanted to have publishing set up and ready to go 6 months down the line.
Yes, yes.
Just the bus factor. You know how it is. And and at first it was just like, you know, dealing with maybe freelancers that were not as tuned into our audience and that kind of thing. And then just scaling back to a core team of 3 writers that were just cream of the crop. Because
Totally.
if you find good writers, like you just keep hold of them forever
It's
because
so true.
they're
And I do want to say that there are incredible writers who maybe weren't right for us, but they're
yeah.
still incredibly talented. There's so much content out there, so many different ways to distribute and create that I will always say, even the writers that I no longer work with, I absolutely am impressed with what they can do. We just learned that we needed a very specific type of writer for the audience we ended up having.
And honestly, it's not even that like not even on writing quality so much as there are some people who are marketers and there are some people who are writers, and there
Yes,
are really rare people that are both.
yes,
And and some people are marketers first, writers second. I'm one of those people personally.
totally.
And then there are other people who are writers first, marketers second. And having a good mix of those people in a project like this, from just again, not that I've done this kind of scale, but I imagine that a mix of those kinds of people is helpful. Absolutely.
Certainly. And we learned so much from them. And just having that really strong group helped so much in trying to move at the volume that we did. I don't think that every company needs to go to that volume. I think for us, it was absolutely the right decision because we had so much to learn. Like I said, we still needed to know who our target personas were at that point. So not only did we see what types of content resonated or what standard of content, what type of, say, it's a listicle versus a longer editorial piece, but also who it was we were talking to.
Yeah. I can absolutely see that. And I think that, because at first like when I first read the story, I thought, "Oh, wow, I wonder what possessed them to publish 700 articles." And then but now that you've like explained that it was like right in the beginning and you needed to figure out all of these different things, and at that moment you're just kind of producing a lot of different things and just trying to see what resonates and what doesn't. So that makes perfect sense to me. And how long did it take you to really figure out, what was really resonating? How much did you have to vary the content? Like talk to me about that.
That's a great question too. So there were definitely things in the very beginning that we published that we realized were not going to perform the way we thought they would. So we use hub and spoke model for a lot of our content. And we were focusing on content clusters that we thought might work. So for example, we thought maybe HR was a target audience of ours. And so we created an entire onboarding cluster. And we realized very quickly that that was not going to do what we thought it would. And in identifying clusters like that, we also did a sales cluster. We learned that use case was actually the most important type of content we could create. And then we realized this product is incredibly horizontal. Let's lean on the pain points that people have. Let's lean on finding the solutions for them, or even looking at something that's akin to Scribe. Let's say they're looking for a template and then they find out that Scribe can actually do for them what they're trying to find. Let's say they're trying to create a video and they learn that Scribe exists. So that was the process that we ended up going through. I would say that we started learning very early, probably in those first 3 months, we started getting pretty good data. And then over the course of that year, we had the chance to pivot the type of content we were creating and really strategize around what we were seeing success in.
And so you mentioned also kind of going through like how to figure out like when the content was good enough. Like
Mhm.
what the standard was that your audience was demanding. How long did it take you to figure that part out? Like, and then what was that standard? Like what became good enough?
That is so hard for any writer or marketer. I think that people in content are very passionate about content. We want to create high quality work, and I completely understand that. But what we found very quickly was that we could obsess over a single piece of content for weeks, and we did
Mhm.
not have the time or the capacity to do that. So we learned that what we wanted to do was answer the query to the best of our ability. So, what is this target keyword? What is the topic? What are the pages ranking in the SERP? And how can we create something that is exactly what this person is looking for, but not obsess over word count or is this written in the most beautiful way? I think that as a writer as well as a marketer, I can obsess over a single sentence as much as I obsess over a piece of content. And it became, does this deliver what we need it to? By creating very strong briefs, we could then create a list of exactly what that was we were looking for, and then the writer could deliver for that. And then once we published that piece of content, we had in mind that this was not the final piece that was going to be there forever. So once you publish, you see how it starts to rank, you see it how it starts to perform. Some of those pages would rank very quickly and perform well and convert. Some pages would get great traffic, but they wouldn't be converting. So then you'd be optimizing for that. And it became, how can we answer the query? And then how can we introduce our product as a natural solution related to this query? And that is definitely a balancing act. And I think that some content will never convert as well as other pieces of content, but it's still very vital because it's so relevant to the topic. It gets incredible traffic. And then you can use that to build links to those other converting pages. And so it becomes about building this universe, this collaboration of pieces that work together. And that's really what we started learning and found worked so well for us.
And then also like on top of that, just to kind of hone in on that point is not every single person that reads a piece of content or consumes a piece of content is ready to buy.
Yes.
So that's also a huge part of it too. I'm a big fan of creating the like content funnels, right? Like
Yes.
I just think that that makes so much more sense than just sort of assuming that every single piece is destined to drive to demo or drive to sign up or whatever it might be. And I think that, yeah, absolutely. Like it, you need all kinds to fit into the puzzle,
You do.
right? Like,
I will say at the very beginning, I think top of funnel is the most useful. Just because if you're creating these really deeply integrated bottom of funnel pages, you're not going to get enough traffic to really work in your favor or gain topical authority. So I would recommend focusing on that first. But then, of course, including middle of funnel listicles are incredible players here, making those pieces work together, and then you can start focusing on building that robust bottom of funnel program.
see that is definitely a contentious point, I think, in the content community, because if you talk to any given content marketer, they'll have a different answer for you around that.
I think
And
you're right.
it's all important, right?
Yes,
Like it's all important. Um and I know that, because the same exact argument, I definitely heard the same exact argument made for bottom of the funnel content, because even if you're only attracting 10 people a month, that's 10 high end 10 people. But I
totally.
agree that if you're really focusing on that organic traffic, top of the funnel has to be, it's got to be in the mix.
I
And
agree. I think you're building
it's
a
going to give
program,
things
right?
traction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think bottom of funnel will give you incredible immediate results. But if you can't have them find someone, if that content isn't going to get the traffic that you need it to, oh my gosh, this cat, I'm moving him down. If that content is moving that way, then it won't get the chance to perform as incredibly as it could. And unfortunately, a lot of really bottom of funnel content doesn't have a lot of traffic. Um,
Mm,
and so that is why I recommend creating that authority first. So then you can funnel audience members toward that content. But I agree. I think it's just a matter of trying things on, and different content marketers are going to have different experiences.
100%. But I think I definitely agree with your take on it. I think it's almost better to build that traction first and then just sort of see like what happens after all that.
And then
So
interlink like crazy.
yeah, yeah. And then internal link, hello? All
Yes.
of them. Um, so I do want to ask, you talked a little bit about your process with freelance writers and how you pared down from a very big team to finally like a quite small, close, and really well defined team. What do you think for you separated like a good freelance writer from like the cream of the crop, so to speak?
Yes. I have a few thoughts there. And from what I've learned, there are some tenets that I always make sure a writer has. So now when I'm speaking to a writer, the first thing that I want to know is, have they written to the channel that I'm writing to? Because SEO is my primary distribution, what I want to see are any examples of them having done that. I'm also in SaaS. Have you written to SaaS? I'm also PLG. Have you written to PLG? It would be an incredible point if you can also show me something that you've gained from it. Can you give me examples of high converting pages that you've written? So that's the first question, just to see if they have experience in the arena we're in. The next question I ask is, have you had any ghostwriting experience? Which is actually one that not many people ask. And the reason I do is because there are different types of writing, and you need to be able to adapt based on the content you're writing, because a lot of the time you're writing to experts in a field that you are not an expert in. Can
Mm,
you change your tone to match not just the style guide that I've provided you with, but to the needs and the jargon of whoever it is that's at the receiving end of that content? So ghostwriters are actually an incredible group of people that can support creating content like this. The last thing that I think is incredibly vital is, how do you take feedback, and do you have a long memory for feedback? So if I'm giving you a piece of content and then I've reviewed it and I've given you my notes and you've applied those notes to that one piece of content, the next piece that you write for me, Do you have those in mind? Are you able to use them to create your internal arsenal of skills that I need? Because then we're able to move so much more quickly. And it's more that we're building a partnership together because you've evolved with the commentary that I provided you with. So I would say those are the three most important values that I've found create the most incredible type of freelancer that I will partner with again and again.
I really love those. I've been working with freelance writers for a long time, and I find that my biggest hiccup is being able to give them to really put a nail on what it is that separates good from exceptional. And
Yes.
I think and tone, honestly, ghostwriting tone, that is so important
Yes.
because I cannot tell you how many writers I ended up turning down for drip just because the tone of voice for the company was just so interesting and unique, and it was so worth protecting that,
Yeah.
like, working with somebody who came in with this, like, ultra formal, just it wasn't working. Like, it just was not going to work. So I love that you touched on that. Um, I do have another question. So, were there any ways you said you did this all with humans? Were you incorporating AI into, I mean, I know you talked about letter drop, which I know incorporates a little bit of AI into just basic processes.
Mhm.
But what did you incorporate AI into any other part of the process?
The answer is really a resounding no, and not because
Wow.
I was against AI in any way. I was motivated once ChatGPT came out and was in its blazing glory to see how we could incorporate AI into our content production flow. Um, but we found very quickly, I started playing around with it. I was trying to see if I could get it to create first drafts. I was trying to see maybe for more programmatic pages, which I'm still open to, by the way. And it is just incredibly repetitive, not just in the language that it uses, but in the type of content it creates and in the structure of the wording. You'll have several different like phrases that are saying exactly the same thing, just with a different word inserted in there. And
Mm,
that is not what Google is looking for. So it really came out of need. It came out of the fact that the type of content we wanted to create, especially when we were trying to be willing to put out good enough that we could then later optimize, we were not going to get that using AI. So when I learned that, it then became a matter of can we use it to help templatize our briefs? We did see use it for support there, which was incredibly helpful. We started building templates and then using AI to populate some of that for topics that were relevant to one another. But as far as published content, AI really was not the resource for us at that time.
no, I can absolutely understand that. The problem with AI is that it does not, like, it doesn't have any subject matter expertise,
Yes.
right? So it's not going to incorporate and analyze and think about quotes or, you know, actual thought leadership or things like that. And this is why, this is something that's really huge at Wordbrew is that we say, like, okay, if you're gonna use AI, do it right.
Mhm.
Inject that human element, inject that authenticity, inject that subject matter expertise. And it's for that exact same reason. Otherwise it's too repetitive. Otherwise an AI can be fantastic to help you do things quicker, but it's far from replacing any of us. I'll tell you that for free.
Absolutely. And that's what I kept thinking. And people were deeply concerned. And I understand from a SERP perspective, right? Like AI coming and populating responses is a very valid concern that people are
Mm,
having. But as far as AI blogs coming and taking anyone's ranking, I do
yeah.
not see that happening at all in the near future. I will never begrudge someone if they want to use it to create an initial draft. Sometimes it's better to just have something there to help you get started. I think that if we can use AI in a clever way to help us move more quickly, absolutely. But it will always just be an additional tool
Yeah.
versus another individual who can create incredible work.
I completely agree. I absolutely agree. And so touching on that actually, so in 2022, ChatGPT landed on the scene, and the content industry at large panicked. Like
Yes.
we lost our minds. And then you had 2023, which was like the layoff of Palooza,
Mhm.
and people were, LinkedIn was covered and this is how you should prompt, and sudden AI experts everywhere. And so now that there's more of a focus, especially coming off the core update for
Yes.
March, which was like music to many of our ears. Um, Now that there's more of a focus on that human touch, like, what are your thoughts on the changes in our industry, and where do you think that's going to go in the next few years?
I think the biggest thing that we're going to be focused on and learning about is diversifying the type of content we create. And also, there will likely be distribution diversity as well.
Mm,
Leaning on SEO as a channel will always be my bread and butter. But the reality is the SERP is pulling things in a very different way now. So even if you are ranking number one, it's not going to show up in the way that it used to. And you are going to be competing with pages that are sponsored. You're going to be competing with the AI generated response. You're now writing to support that AI generated response. So finding ways to create different content types that are going to support these different ways that the SERP is moving will be incredibly vital. When I say that, I think that it's going to be a matter of looking more at those bottom of funnel pieces, because when a person is looking specifically for a tool, or when a person is looking, like I mentioned, to use a template or apply, that AI generated answer will never usurp what you put out there.
hmm.
So leaning heavily on that. And then finding unique ways to distribute your work is probably also going to play into that. And I will be honest, I'm not even sure what that's going to look like for us yet, because content written for SEO, in my opinion, shouldn't necessarily be blasted on social media because it's not the same medium. It doesn't support the same things. It should be written in a different way. The title will be incredibly different. So, as we learn, myself included, it'll be about us figuring out how we can use Google in tandem with other things, and then how we can create different pieces of work that can work alongside with the blogs that we're used to building.
And this is, I really love that you said that organic pieces, like the written for SEO for SERP purposes, should not be distributed on social. I could not agree more. I have struggled throughout my career to convince leadership that no, we shouldn't tweet this article. No, we shouldn't just drop a link from our company LinkedIn to this article. It's not going to resonate for X, Y, and Z reasons. And it's just because the intent from these channels is different.
Yes.
And you have to respond to that. So I love that you touched on that. Like that's this is a night of vindication for me as
Yes,
a content professional.
I feel so passionately about this, because I would not read a blog on LinkedIn that I would read on Google, because on LinkedIn, I'm not looking for that basic thing. People are creating like these clickbaity titles. That's actually another thing that I would say is you need to really understand the channel you're writing to. If it's the SERP, then you need to be up in Google. And if it's
Yeah,
LinkedIn, if it's Twitter or X, whatever it is now, you need to understand what motivates those people, how they speak, what's going to catch their eye. Like all of those things need to be at play. It's not about just creating a piece of content and then finding six distribution channels. It's about understanding those channels and then finding your content and making it work for those channels. So it's just a
exactly.
completely different mindset.
Like
And
adapting the content per
yes,
each channel. So you're
exactly.
not just taking this one monolith that you've created and just blasting it and all that stuff. It's no, it's like how can we adapt this into a carousel for LinkedIn? How do
Yes.
we adapt this into a video for Instagram, or if that makes sense for you, like
And
yeah,
then what does
100%.
good look like in that world too? Like
Yeah.
what are we measuring these against? We're very metric heavy at Scribe. We've always been thinking about the ROI, meaning that every piece of content we create has a role or should. And that is incredibly gratifying too. So thinking about those channels and what's going to support success on those channels and how you're defining that is another piece of it.
Mhm. I absolutely love our chat today. It was so insightful. I loved everything that you spoke about today. the processes, the data driven, all of it. Honestly, like, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you just let people know where they can find you and where they can consume more of the amazing content that you're creating?
Oh my gosh, you were so sweet. So first I'm going to say look at the Scribe blog because that is my job. So scribehow.com, go check out the best tool in the world. But then I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I've met so many incredible content writers on LinkedIn, other marketers. My name, like I mentioned, is Lauren Funaro. I'm very active on that page. So if anyone is interested in adding me or connecting with me there, I'd love to chat or answer any questions that they have.
Amazing. Thank you so, 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 so much.
Oh my gosh,
And
thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure.
I mean, honestly, like, I love it. All right, let me go ahead and I don't know how to end. I'm just going to stop the recording and hope they added it.
Yeah,